So in this video we're going to look at how we measure economic development, and the first thing to point out is that economic development is a much broader concept than economic growth. Indeed, it's a normative one. It involves subjective judgments, so which measures we use is a matter of subjective judgment. However, the key thing is economic development is not just economic growth. Economic growth could be caused by actions which do significant environmental damage, or you could benefit from a product such as oil or gold or diamonds, but the proceeds could only go to a few rich people at the top of society and therefore not benefiting the whole of society. So therefore GDP and GNI, gross domestic product, gross national income, both measures of economic growth, are a problem in terms of measuring development, because we need to consider the quality of life. We need to consider the general well-being for the average citizen, for all. So therefore, we look at two key measures of economic development. One is the Human Development Index, HDI. The other is the Genuine Progress Indicator. If we start with the Human Development Index, you tend to come down with a number between 0 and 1. 0 would certainly be pretty bad. If you've got a score around about 0.5, this is among the lowest in the world. So below that is particularly severely bad. Whereas if you're around about 0.8 or higher, like many Scandinavian countries, such as Norway, Sweden and Denmark, then that's a high HDI score. In fact, some people say HDI measures how Scandinavian you are. So it consists of three areas: income, health and education. In income, okay, we do look at gross national income. On health, we look at life expectancy at birth. In education, we're looking at the mean years of schooling and the expected years of schooling for a 5-year-old. So the number of years schooling is basically the key measure in education. So that's 4 variables there. And they're put together to come up with this index. Now, the problem is that it doesn't consider income distribution, nor does it consider how sustainable the development that is taking place is. It doesn't take into account the quality of housing, the quality of education, it doesn't take into account gender equality, it doesn't take into account, in fact, the quality of life. You might have live a long time, but what about the quality of life? Or you're suffering from a significant disease which impairs that life. And indeed, it's the quality of education, because you might spend a lot of years in primary education, but it could be of pretty low quality. Of course, these things are hard to measure. But one good point is that the data is available, so pretty well every country in the world has an HDI index rating. Now, a development of this to improve the HDI index was the Inequality Human Development Index, and this takes into account the loss of development due to inequality, due to the inequality of resources distributed within society. So if you had a perfect distribution of resources, your HDI would be the same, well rather your IHDI would be the same as your HDI. But if this is significantly below HDI, it indicates there's a large element of inequality, which means a significant proportion of the population aren't benefiting from your economic development that's taking place. So the way this works is that from income, health and education, a certain proportion is taken off for the level of inequality, and the level of inequality is based on a measure like the Gini coefficient, actually the Atkinson index, which is a very similar index. And that leaves us with the Genuine Progress Indicator. This has 4 categories. This considers income, so it does consider standard living in a narrow way, weighted by private consumption, how much private consumption is. Now, it also considers non-market services. So these are things such as voluntary work, charity work, childcare, looking after the sick, looking after the elderly. Okay, these non-market services are very valuable in society and certainly not measured by GDP and conventional economic growth statistics. So non-market services are often important, especially in some poor countries. It also takes off the cost of natural deterioration of the environment, so that if you're exploiting a resource and that resource will be lost, or you're taking part in economic activity which will damage the environment, such as damaging the rainforests, then this is taken off because it's not genuine progress. So it also includes a sort of level of capital stock, so new firms building factories or new roads would be a positive in your general progress indicator. So the good thing about it does actually include the value of leisure time. So you can push up your economic growth, your GDP statistics, just by working longer hours. But does that lead to an increase in human welfare? Probably not. So therefore it includes leisure time, includes voluntary work, as I've just said, and also the distribution of income, as well as the environmental impacts. So this has a big advantage compared to GDP. Certainly does not take into account what we call negative externalities, such as pollution, so air pollution, water pollution, okay, and environmental degradation. It encourages broader policy goals, so it encourages governments, if they want to move up on GPI, it encourages them to take a long-term, sustainable approach to development, not just to maximise GDP in the short run, perhaps at the expense of the environment. So the obvious problem with this indicator is that it's hard to actually give non-economic variables a numerical value. How do you actually measure leisure time? How do we measure the value of a rainforest? So we have to apportion values to this in order to get the GPI. And of course the last problem is data is often incomplete for many poor countries. Now, conventionally rich countries with a high GDP don't always come high on this score. Okay, in fact they can actually have negative scores often because of their environmental impact in the future. So it's probably best when you're looking at economic development to take a range of measures. So thank you for watching, I hope that's useful.